Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Real Science Exchange, the pubcast where leading scientists and industry professionals meet over a few drinks to discuss the latest ideas and trends in animal nutrition. Hi, my name is Scott Sorrell. I'm going to be your host tonight, and in the co-pilot seat is Walt Cooley from Progressive Dairy Magazine. Welcome, Walt. And my special guest is an old friend, Stan. We've known each other for quite a while. Stan's with DMI. And Stan, we build this thing is taking place in a pub, and that it's always happy hour here, but we're kind of putting that to the test today, right? I mean, we're in Reno, Nevada at 6:45 in the morning, and so I guess it is happy hour, because what's in your glass this morning?
And hence a Bloody Mary, but we've got our glass
A
of
milk
milk
chaser.
as well. Absolutely. Scott, thank you.
You're very welcome. Stan, you also brought a guest with you to the pub tonight. Would you mind introducing him? Well,
Yes.
first, introduce yourself,
Okay,
right?
yes.
And then introduce your guest.
Stan Erwine. I lead our farmer relations team at Dairy Management Incorporated, which is the national checkoff organization.
Yeah.
And we'll cover a little bit about what is the checkoff. But the guest, Marty McKinzie, who's the Chief Operations Officer for Dairy Max, which is one of our state and regional organizations, because we're a mixture and a collaboration of a national organization with one plan that is then carried out through local organizations. Because as you know, Scott, Walt, how regional and how different dairy is around the country and how dairy farms are individual.
Excellent. So why don't we, Stan, just kind of start at the beginning. What is checkoff?
New research is changing everything we thought we knew about choline's impact on the cow and her calf, and top scientists have a lot to say about it. They are presenting new research that supports choline as a required nutrient to optimize milk production, choline as a required nutrient to support a healthy transition, choline as a required nutrient to improve calf health and growth, and choline as a required nutrient to increase colostrum quantity. This new research is solidifying choline's role as a required nutrient for essentially every cow, regardless of health status, milk production level, or body condition score. Learn more about the science that is changing the game and the choline source that is making it happen. Reassure precision-release choline from Balchem. Visit balchem.com/scientistsay to learn more.
Well, thank you very much, because I think we learned a couple of meetings we have. We're very aware, but the checkoff has grown to the point that we need to just begin at the beginning. And so the checkoff was created in 1983. It was created by farmers for farmers. It is a self-help program to help drive sales, consumption, and an increasingly consumer trust in dairy. Let's go back to 1983-84. Why? At that point in time, and we learned this here, you know this, Walt, with the work you do with your magazine, our dairy farmers are very efficient. They're very good at producing more milk. Well, go back to 1983. We found ourselves in a position where the farmers were producing 139 billion pounds of milk. Only 122 billion of it was being consumed. So hence the need for a program and the development of a 15-cent per hundredweight checkoff that goes into a promotional kitty that is used to, again, promote dairy, but doing it, a nickel of it goes to the National Dairy Board and our work, whether it be with the National Dairy Council, the research and education arm on the nutrition side, or what we do in crisis management and issues. And Marty, we should probably talk about that at some point. And then our work with partners, whether it be Domino's, Taco Bell, McDonald's, to drive sales through, local restaurants. McDonald's, 14,000 locations, 80% of their menu is dairy, and they advertise to a tune of about
Say that again, 80%?
80% of their menu has dairy.
Is that right?
So you look at going through retail, and this was all a shift in the plan from when we were an advertising company. Everybody would remember Got Milk. Got Milk was iconic. It made us feel good.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, the farmers who direct us said this is fine, but it's not changing the trajectory of dairy sales.
It wasn't working. People
No,
know it,
it
but
made us feel good,
yeah,
and that's a good message we've gotten out, but people now understand.
yeah.
But that's when we made the shift to working with partners.
Mhm.
You know, Stan, I think the importance of that collaboration and working outside of ourselves and the partnership with those groups you talked about are extremely important. You know, beyond that, I think it's partnerships within the industry too. I mean, so many of our partners like Walt and Progressive Dairymen and our state dairy associations and others contribute, in ways that we can in furthering the message and the work that we do. A lot of that goes back to consumer trust and actions on the farm, production practices and better understanding those and doing those. So that's not as frequently talked about, but I think the relationships that exist there are equally as important as some of the more higher profile things like McDonald's and Domino's that really drive sales. There's trust and sales, and we work equally in both areas oftentimes.
Well, let me circle back real quick. Sorry. How many partners do you have? And then what does a partnership look like?
So that's a really good question. So a partnership, when I look at it at the level of a McDonald's, a Taco Bell, we continue to do some work with pizza, particularly in the export markets, driving sales. Um, Taco Bell, McDonald's, Domino's. There's some others in the wings that we're continuing to look at, particularly the chicken category, Raising Cane's. Um, But I think the other part of it when we look at partners is partnering with other organizations, whether it be US DEC, whether it be, our media partners. Um, I think the other point too would be the continued evolution of the checkoff, which Walt, you're a good partner. You can probably speak to the evolution you've observed of the checkoff over the years. But I also want to flag for our listeners. Um, they can get additional information by going to dairycheckoff.com. And that's a pretty robust site where there is great information that anticipates their questions, or they can submit additional questions. Marty, anything I would have left out in terms of the partners?
I don't think so, Stan. Not in that vein. I think there are opportunities, at a local level, oftentimes
Yes.
because headquarters of certain companies may exist within the geography of our state or regions. For Dairy Max, particularly, Smoothie King is an example of that, and we have initiated a partnership with Smoothie King, and again, a huge focus on protein in a lot of their beverages and drinks and menus. Smoothie King is one of the partnerships that we've identified because of the prominence and importance to the Gen Z, Gen Z group.
Let's just say with Smoothie King, um, dairy farmer dollars are going to them, or are we then trying to influence them, or are they trying to then influence their customers?
We are working directly with them to influence their menu offering and the
Got it.
focus on dairy because again, oftentimes people don't realize that to elevate the protein in some of
Yeah,
those beverages, whey protein is an additive, and so there are dairy components too that you wouldn't just on the surface recognize
right.
as being dairy based.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that.
One of my
Yes.
one of my son's favorite fast food meals is the grilled cheese burrito from Taco Bell. And if I'm remembering correctly, Stan, so the way that the Checkoff partnership works is they embed a research and development food scientist in these corporations, and so that research and development scientist brainstorms with the staff that exist and kind of brings a dairy farmer perspective, saying, "Hey, let's see how we could add some more cheese to this, or how could we, make this a little bit more flavorful with some dairy products." And they do a great job because literally, if we go to Taco Bell, that is what he's getting. He's getting the grilled cheese burrito.
That's a great point, Walt, because I think again, if you look at the strategy over 11 to 12 years working with Taco Bell. Now, next future. We began with, they always used dairy, but it was more of a garnish, some cheese, some sour cream. They saw the benefit of, well, let's look at dairy as a hero. The grilled cheese burrito, and then again, dairy scientists that basically, Marty, we've just learned there's going to be a cheese shell. It's made out. So things where now we're looking at that burrito and others 10x the amount of cheese we used to use. But your question's also really good, and I'm glad you asked it. I think some farmers think we just write checks to these partners. A lot of what we do, the Checkoff has world-class research, and you can speak to this, whether it's nutrition research, whether it's consumer research on our changing consumer, Gen Z. How do we talk about dairy to them? We typically say, well, dairy is, the perfect food, 9 or is it 13 essential minerals and nutrients. But that's us talking to each other. The consumer, the young consumer, health and wellness is mind and body. They want to know, where does dairy fit into my need for calmness, energy to get through a difficult day, immunity, digestive health? And when we begin to message to them in that way, magic happens. But I think that's the other thing would be it's a lot of it's very, very good research. But the other is it's important to know that when we enter into these agreements, they have targets they need to hit, we need to hit as we examine our relationship managers work with our various partners.
And Stan, we have shifted some of those relationships as a result of either meeting those benchmarks or identifying that we need to shift. And there's certain partners that we focused outside the borders of the U.S. as opposed to focusing within the borders of the U.S. as a result of some of that analysis and some of that, some of those hard discussions and really, really deep diving in to make sure that the dollars are being spent most effectively.
No, that's another great point. And then, Walt, I want to come to you because I think the other thing, for those who saw our panel that was here talking about a future-ready checkoff, what are we doing looking at dairy innovation to put us in health and wellness categories, or how long have we talked, Scott, about nutraceuticals?
Exactly.
Well, now
Yeah,
dairy is medicine, and being in categories where maybe it's not the dairy aisle, but it's the ability to capitalize on these other opportunities. But well, a lot of what we've done, and Barbara O'Brien is into her 4th year as the CEO, and a lot of this has been her initiative to say, I want the Checkoff to be more transparent to the farmers. If they have questions, we're going to address them. I want us to be willing to look at programs maybe that we've done in the past that maybe we move into another arena to use farmer dollars more wisely. And I think the other is, again, empowering staff and bringing in teams that are talented people to think differently, operate differently, and have a bias for action. But Walt, you can probably speak to that just in how you have observed through the years how the Checkoff has evolved.
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing I would say, Stan, is in our magazine, there's a few hot topics that will get letters to the editor written, and the Checkoff is usually one of them. But I could say over the last 4 or 5 years that the number of letters that I get related to the Checkoff has been smaller, so obviously something is working. But I think one of the things that is interesting to me is how the Checkoff is always to use, I think it's the Wayne Gretzky quote, they're skating to where the puck is. Let me give you an example. So a few years ago, we were talking about the gaming generation and making sure we had partnerships with Mr. Beast and YouTube and embedding cows into Minecraft. And I was like, this is kind of out there. Like this is weird. And then yet I have 2 boys, and they were a little bit outside that time frame, right, when that discussion was coming out. But now, guess where they're at? They're on Minecraft. They're YouTubing. They're gaming. So I just love how the Dairy Checkoff always seems to be skating where the puck is, and it's exciting to come to a place like Western Dairy Management Conference and hear the panel, because you get to hear where the puck's going to be, and maybe you're like, that's nutraceuticals. That's kind of weird, but you've done the research, you've done your homework, and you know where that's going to be. And I think dairy producers just give it some time. In 2 or 3 years, you're going to see some of these examples of things coming out that you're like, wow, I heard about that 2 or 3 years ago.
I was chuckling because my daughters are 34 and 31, and I'm talking about Mr. Beast. I'm talking about some of these trends, and they go, Dad, what the heck do you know about Mr. Beast? Who are you following? But they also, where do they get their ideas? Where do they get the recipes? Where are they learning today? Influencers.
Yeah.
So you hit the nail on the head.
Well, I mean, you guys did. That's kudos to the Checkoff. Like you're skating to where the puck is. You know what the trend is going to be, and you're getting ahead of the curve.
Yeah. We've had a couple conversations this week about U.S. exports, and Marty, you mentioned that you're looking for partnerships outside the U.S. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what does that look like, or in terms of skating to the puck, are we skating towards maybe doing something with more exports?
So I'll take that at the high level. And then,
Yeah.
Marty, I know because you have a neighbor in Mexico, which is our largest export customer, that you guys are very involved in supporting U.S. Deck above and beyond, maybe what we look at overall. But first thing, going back to Checkoff being farmer directed, we have an 81-member board. Sounds like a big board, but we've got to have representation across the country. But they truly make these decisions. And I had a farmer remind me from the board in Ohio one time. He goes, I think sometimes other farmers think we just rubber stamp things that are coming through. Have you ever known a farmer to rubber stamp anything? So no, there's good debate, there's strong discussion. But when it comes to exports, let's go back to 1995. 3% of our dairy was being exported. It was basically, we were getting rid of what we had overproduced. It was not geared to the needs of our customers. That number is now between 16 and 17%. And we've got to keep in mind that 95% of consumers live outside the United States. We're going to continue to grow domestic, but we've got to grow the export, and so that's what's being done. And it's being done now through some work by some previous CEOs at U.S. Dairy Export Council, but also through Krista Harden now, where we have partnerships in these key countries. So we're looking to whatever we do to make sure that the product, the ingredients, and keeping in mind that, most of what we ship over are dry milk solid products. We're not necessarily shipping milk, but making sure that those products, the ingredients that we're providing, meet the needs of the customer in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, Stan. I think, important to the Dairy Max region, which Dairy Max, by the way, covers 8 states in the western central part of the U.S., from Montana down to New Mexico, Texas, and Louisiana. So we are effectively border to border as a state and regional organization, but the increase in processing capacity, which has been a topic this week as well, the increase in processing capacity has necessitated a focus for us as a state and region, and our dairy farmer board has supported and given direction to go ahead and like Stan mentioned, support U.S. DEC in a way that facilitates the movement of some of that additional cheese, additional powder that could easily go into Mexico because of our proximity to that country. Just this past summer, we leveraged some of the partnerships that we have locally with the Dallas Cowboys and HEB, which is a regional grocery chain, but one that certainly has a following, that is, indicative of the products that they offer and the services that they provide. But HEB has stores in Mexico. And as a result of our partnership domestically within the states, we were able to work with them. And if you think about our partnership with the Dallas Cowboys, which Dairy Max is the official nutrition partner of the Dallas Cowboys and has been for several years, again, leveraging the value, the nutritional value, and the positivity around dairy. Cowboys are extremely popular in Mexico, and so we did a few events in store where we had Rowdy, the mascot for the Cowboys, and worked to highlight U.S. produced cheese in those stores, and during that time period saw a fairly significant increase in purchasing. And again, I don't want to take sole credit for that, but certainly I think our presence there and working with U.S. DEC and understanding the Mexican consumer and the dynamic that exists there was extremely positive.
So let's stay on exports for a second, and Walt, I'm gonna come to you. You know, readers of your magazine are growing. They're expanding their dairies. They're expanding milk production. What's the importance of exports to your readers?
Oh yeah, sure. We've had a conversation here in another podcast with Scott, and we're talking about multiple countries worth of U.S. milk being needed in the future, and so there's definitely going to be a place for U.S. dairy to grow. And like you said, Stan, we need to grow the domestic market, but definitely there's going to be an opportunity in the world somewhere.
And we will grow the domestic market because, as we've seen, how people consume their dairy is different. We're at currently, what is it, Marty? I think it's 38 pounds of cheese consumed by Americans per capita.
Yeah.
You look at that and somebody says, well, can we continue to grow that? I counter that with, well, do you have any idea what per capita consumption of cheese is in France?
Right.
It's about 63 pounds. So people love their cheese. There's great growth opportunities will continue to be.
Yeah. Well, Torsten, kind of going back to the conversation we had in the other podcast, you said we will continue to grow it. His position is there's going to be, by 2050, 450 million more tons that's going to be needed. And it's not because we're driving it or we're growing it. It's because the marketplace is going to demand it. All right. Now, who's going to get that? Who's going to get that volume? And I think the U.S. is positioned nicely to get a big lion's share of that. And then kind of to build on that, Torsten had he had 3 glasses of milk in front of him, a big Texas-style mug, and that kind of represented what we consume here in the States and in Europe. And then he had some smaller glasses that represents what they're doing in some of the developing countries. And so they're not drinking near as much. But I think there's the opportunity of doing some of the stuff that you've done in Mexico and building products and incorporating, like you've done with Taco Bell, dairy into other parts of their diets and getting them addicted to cheese like we are. So
no, you're exactly right. And so, you had some other industry leaders on this podcast from the Western Dairy Management Conference. And again, kudos to the Western Dairy Management Conference. And Walt, I've had the pleasure of working with you on the Planning and Programming Committee. And, like so many things, we kind of hit a little detour in 2020. We've had some weather issues, but we're back to, 1,200 attendees. Some of the best programming I think I have seen in years, industry leaders. But you visited with Greg Dowd with NMPF. You visited with Corey Geiger. And I think the message you got from them was the growth potential for dairy is tremendous.
Yeah.
The investment in dairy and new processing
here in the States
is tremendous, which is a strong signal, again, that this industry is going to continue to grow. Barb mentioned dairy renaissance, that we're seeing a dairy renaissance. And I had a board member at our February board meeting go, Stan, renaissance, help me understand that, because, obviously I'm dealing with some stressed milk prices. But when Barb says dairy renaissance, what do you see? What does that mean? I said, well, take a step back. When you look at Time magazine, when you look at it's New York Times, you look at Vogue, now talking about dairy, and its growth. I mean, that's a significant shift. So you look at that, the cultural relevance. You look at, again, consumer trends. And how consumers are looking to dairy in that health and wellness area, consuming more dairy. You take that, you look at the investment that's occurring in the United States, and then you look at the advancement, and this gets back to Barb and Paul and Eve's presentation, it gets back to the advancement, the rapid advancement of science and technology and innovation that is going to allow us to go back to that dairy is medicine, to look at categories that are billion-dollar categories that we're not necessarily playing in, whether that's gut health, whether that's skin health, whether that's aging. And you talk to any young person today, they're thinking about all these and what will foods do to help me achieve those things. So that's the
Yeah, I have
renaissance.
to just an example here. So at the conference, sitting at a table during lunch, and with some other producers, and there's a young lady who's sitting at the table, and as soon as the meal is over, she gets out this pill case and begins to kind of portion out some pills, and everyone's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Well, I take this pill for skin health, and I take this one, and for gut health." And she had at least 8 or 10 pills she was going to take after the meal. And so I think again, this is just one of those things where the upcoming generation has a hyper focus on health and very targeted needs that they might have with their health, understanding their own health better than maybe we have in the past. And so these supplements, the place for dairy as a supplement, we all know they're all in like a glass of milk, but being able to target specific things that are in milk and maybe even hyper concentrate those nutraceuticals into a pill, that's what this next generation is looking at.
And Stan, to add to that, though, I think you talked a lot about things that we're actively working on, but the results that we have seen in the most recent year as it relates to sales and increase in consumption of yogurt, for example, cheeses. Cottage cheese has become a phenomenon as a result of some influence and the focus on protein. So all of those things are real time that we can point to in really the Renaissance, if you will, and again, those things have to work themselves through.
Marty, that's a great point, because our farmers, they measure everything.
Mhm.
And so results are really key to them. So looking at, and we sampled here a brand new product from General Mills under the Nature Valley brand, Yo-Bark yogurt chips. And it was work we'd been doing with General Mills since 2021 to look at this trend of yogurt, which is growing, but the trend of it wasn't growing among young adults. So they like to share snacks. It's a shareable experience. So how can we create an experience? And I hope you've tried them at breakfast. But what we've done is we had that research to help them not only see that there's a trend we can capitalize on with the young consumer, but we've also got to help capitalize on mom and dad want to see them eating a nutritious product, but we've got to marry those two things. But I think when we talk about that new technology and the young lady you mentioned having lunch with, Eve Pollitt, who heads up our Milk Molecule Initiative, talked very specifically to that and to what we're going to see into the future with these trends. And, basically being able to have DNA driven, what do you need to have in your diet? But two things that we're looking at right now, and getting back to this health and wellness, was looking at the milk molecule and a milk molecule that can address immunity, a milk molecule that can address improved sleep, and some people need that more than others. Some people sleep on the road well like I do, others not so much. But so tryptophan, which has those sleep, when you look at dairy products, it'll have that, or lactoferrin on the immunity, and being able to encapsulate that. And we're already beginning to see products that are going to be used, because the dairy farmers, that's the question to Paul Zeminski, who leads our health, wellness, insights, and innovation team. Hey, this is great. This is very, very exciting, but what are you doing for sales right now? How quickly can you commercialize this? And so there's a lot of exciting things happening.
Kind of want to build on, you're talking about the components of milk and the health effects. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that being Balchem and the choline company, right? Milk is the richest source of choline available, and 83% of the U.S. population is deficient in choline, so drink your milk. And choline's needed in virtually every cell in the body, for mental health. There's data showing it staves off Alzheimer's. So anyway,
No,
I'll get off the cold.
no.
bandwagon.
That actually makes a nice bridge. We just are in the midst. Every 5 years we have, and again, it's the federal government, the dietary guidelines for Americans, which again looks at what is the consumption, what is the recommended. Is it 3 a day? Does it remain 3 a day? National Dairy Council, which a lot of our farmers don't necessarily understand that that is part of the checkoff. That's the dairy nutrition, the dairy science people that do that work. We cannot lobby. We can't get under the regulatory side, which you, I think, all well know. But because of the strong history of the National Dairy Council and the credible third-party research they did, I believe, Marty, it was 26 papers for that comment period to be able to submit and say, here is the case for dairy remaining its own food group, which did not happen in some countries around the world. Here's the evidence of why dairy needs to be and remain at that 3 a day. And I'll tell you, we were under significant pressure from other beverages to make that change. But through their great work, we've retained all those strength and all those positions. And to your point, dairy is what, Marty? It's provides minerals.
It well, three of the four
There you
nutrients
go.
of three of the four nutrients of concern for Americans are met strongly by dairy and dairy products, and so calcium, vitamin D, and potassium are those three nutrients that are strongly provided by dairy products, and beyond that, 20% of the protein in the American diet comes from dairy, and about 50% of the vitamin D and calcium is provided to the American diet by dairy products as well. So, in addition to choline,
Yeah, we need to add a fourth.
yeah,
But
yeah,
so as you say,
sir.
these are nutrients that Americans are not getting
No.
enough of.
Yeah. Hmm.
So there's one other thing I want to, and I think you saw it here. Dairy is being celebrated, the growth, the potential we have, but we often miss this. Dairy is a powerhouse, and this is some messaging we do with Making Every Drop Count to remind people, and particularly the dairy farmers that produce it, that hey, number one, it is the strongest single category at retail. $85 billion in sales in the last 52-week period. And it's growing more rapidly, and it's a stronger category than liquor. And I've been known to like a bourbon, so I'm just like,
Or a
hey,
Bloody Mary.
Yeah, or a Bloody Mary. I'm going, so, but then beyond that, listen to these numbers. Household penetration. So it's not just, looking at some of those broader numbers, but household penetration. I'd like the audience to think about, Walt, you know this, Marty, you know this. 96% of households consume and have cheese. Think of that. Think of another product would have that kind of penetration. 92% milk, 28 gallons per buyer, 82% ice cream, 81% yogurt, 75% butter. What a portfolio of strength that we're going to continue to grow from.
Anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap it up here, Stan?
No, I think I addressed the dairy renaissance, the health and wellness. Maybe real quickly, Marty, we've got a long-term agreement with the Mayo Clinic. And it's a long-term agreement. It's not a partnership. It's a long-term research-based agreement. Can you quickly just summarize what we're doing there and some of the potential?
Well, Stan, and this is certainly going to be a collaborative effort, but I think that relationship certainly is one that's extremely important. We've talked about the focus on health and wellness. We've talked about the credibility of different partners, and certainly the Mayo Clinic is representative of an entity that has very, very strong credibility. And so, again, focusing on the science, focusing on the research, and the validation of dairy's role in the American diet and how that is going to drive health and wellness into the future, I think is extremely important. One thing I would say about that though is oftentimes when we are doing things like this, those that aren't supportive of dairy take a focus on those organizations or those entities, and so I think that also is something that we need to recognize as part of the work that we do continually. We are looking to ensure that we have all of our bases covered, and again, the credibility of Mayo, the validation and history that they have in the science and in the researchers that they do are extremely important to that.
And I'll put a real quick ribbon around that. So that credible research that I talked about the National Dairy Council doing, that was observed by Mayo, which again, strong research base. That had to be, that had to be the entry point, working together. But with where they're headed long term, they're looking at, they wanted to focus on whole milk foods and the ability of those whole milk foods in the work that they're doing to focus on cardiovascular and metabolic disease. And I think Paul said it really well, that we want to move from the position of, well, dairy doesn't contribute to either of those, to a position through the research of, no, dairy is a strong thing to have to address cardiovascular and metabolic disease.
Yeah, the importance of the first 1,000 days of life is another piece that is a focus, because early brain development is extremely important, and the value of dairy in that role is something else. The last thing I would say, Stan, too, though, is just really quickly, is the real faces of dairy that we know is driven through Balcom, how the importance of really identifying to the consumer who our dairy farmers are and the work that they do. Oftentimes, I know at Dairy Max we get that question of, who is a dairy farmer? What does a dairy farmer look like? And the work that's been done there has been helpful and supportive in that effort.
Yeah, thank you for that. We got 76,000 followers on our Facebook page.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's
So
quite
fantastic. So in closing, for me, again, an information source that is robust and it's continuing to grow is dairycheckoff.com for those that want to learn more about their checkoff.
Yeah. No, such your closing comments, because I was going to ask everybody to kind of give kind of a closing couple takeaways. I'll circle back to you. Walt?
Tonight's last call question is brought to you by Niasure Precision Release Niacin. Niacin is a proven vasodilator for heat stress reduction and a powerful antilipolytic agent for lowering high blood NEFA in transition cows. Protected with Balchem's proprietary encapsulation technology, you can be sure it is being delivered where and when your cows need it. Learn more at balchem.com/Niasure.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here with Stan and the Dairy Checkoff. I would relate the Dairy Checkoff for our farmer audience to kind of like that team that you cheer for. Everyone has a passionate team that you cheer for, and when you know your team so well and you know your team's good, you want them to win by 60 points, right? Every single time, it's like, why aren't we winning by 60 points? We're so good. And you like it when you win. I just want to say, I think the Dairy Checkoff is winning. I think sometimes dairy producers want them to win by 60 points. And there's a lot of other forces out there that are fighting against the Dairy Checkoff, but Dairy Checkoff is winning. Even if it's not by 60 points, we're winning. And that's because they're playing defense, where they're keeping nutrition in schools and in different places where other people want to pull it out of. And then they're also just being offensive. They're skating to where the puck is. They're looking for those next opportunities. So we all love dairy. We want it to win huge. And it is winning, even if maybe we're thinking the margin is maybe not as big as we want it to be.
Yeah. Love the comments, and I'm glad to be a part of it, Stan, with help tell the message of the home team, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Marty, any final comments?
Just the complementary work that goes on both at the national level and at the local levels to ensure that we're maximizing and reaching the highest potential of return for our dairy farmers is key. I can't think of another organization I would want to work for that has the breadth and depth of coverage that we do. If you think about the topics that we've covered just in this short time, from health and wellness to influencers and Gen Z and the consumer, as well as product innovation and the development that's going on there, all of those things are extremely important to the future. and the strength of the dairy industry is has been talked about significantly this week and increasingly over what we can expect in the future. And I'm just extremely excited to do this work on behalf of the dairy farmer, and I know the combination of those efforts from national to local really are meeting the needs and getting there. And Walt, thank you for the kind words about us winning, because we all feel that we are, and getting that message out and developing the relationships that allow for that sharing of information is critical.
Yeah, well said, Marty. Stan, any final comments?
Yeah, just one. There's two. Again, the importance of the state and regional collaboration. We just had Marty here, but you've got, and everybody knows and often knows their local organization better than they know DMI. We want to, again, work with them to make sure that if they have a question, seek out your state and regional organization. I think the other goes back to results. Sometimes it's difficult for us. For all of the, 110 billion pounds of milk sold since we were created, that we've helped drive that sale and consumption. We cannot engage on the price side of things, so I think sometimes our team, I feel frustrated that our work has not resulted in a better milk check for farmers. But when it comes to results, somebody goes, well, give me an ROI, give me a result. So one of them I often use, and went back to the dairy scientist, is our partners are tremendous marketers. They're tremendous organizations that run strong retail chains, but they're not functional in dairy. And you mentioned the dairy scientist. So one of those others was McDonald's coming to us after seeing some research from the National Dairy Council that after about 20 years, everybody said, you know what? There are good fats in milk. Butter is back, which was Forbes, I think, June 14 article in Forbes magazine. But to have McDonald's that same year, 2015, come to us and say, we've seen the research, we want to make a shift in all 14,000 locations from margarine to butter. We want it done in 6 months. We had a dairy scientist work with them to get that done. Results? 600 million additional pounds of milk sold through that change, and that was 9 years ago. So a lot of our category work creates change that continues to give. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Yeah. So that's it.
All right. Thank you, Stan. I appreciate you and appreciate all you do for the
Thank you,
industry.
Scott.
Walt, thank you for joining us. Marty, great guest. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us here. Glad to be part of the team. And to the other team members out there, thanks for coming along once again. I hope you learned something. I hope you had some fun, and I hope to see you next time here at the Real Science Exchange, where it's always happy hour and you're always among friends.
We'd love to hear your comments or ideas for topics and guests, so please reach out via email at anh.marketing@bellchem.com with any suggestions, and we'll work hard to add them to the schedule. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating on your way out. You can request your Real Science Exchange t-shirt in just a few easy steps. Just like or subscribe to the Real Science Exchange and send us a screenshot along with your address and t-shirt size to anh.marketing@bellchem.com. Bellchem's Real Science Lecture Series of webinars takes place on the first Tuesday of every month, with the top research and nutrition topics that will impact your business. We also include small ruminant, monogastric, and companion animal-focused topics throughout the year. Visit bellchem.com/realscience to see the upcoming topics and to register for future webinars. You can also access past webinars and search for the topics most important to you.